Today begins the 50th commemoration of our war in Vietnam.
And we saw the guns firing at us.
Our founders, in their genius, gave us a task.
I can remember it being right in my face. And I thought I was going to fly right through it.
To overcome a sometimes painful past.
I see this little guy, black pajamas, black hat, holding an AK-47. And I say, I've got company.
You did your job. You served with honor.
I told John how much this story of forgiveness and reconciliation was meaning to other Vietnam veterans.
This is a story of reconciliation. It's an unlikely story with friendships that seem even more unlikely. Vietnam veterans finding peace with their past, their service, and with themselves. We begin in North Carolina. Today he enjoys making beer and lives happily with his wife. But on January 20th in 1972, life was very different for now retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel John Stiles. He hopped in the back seat of his RF-4 and he and his pilot took off on a reconnaissance mission to see if North Vietnamese forces were moving surface-to-air missiles into the neighboring country of Laos.
And sure enough, we see one. And it's coming down the road, and we didn't get a good picture of it. But when we saw it, we saw that it was with a whole bunch of AAA anti-aircraft guns. Since we didn't get a good picture, we decided to exchange our airspeed for altitude, pull up into what we call a Whifferdale maneuver. The airplane is slammed violently sideways, and now we find ourselves in an upside-down spin, going towards the ground.
They were hit and had only seconds to eject. Then Captain Stiles and his pilot parachute into the jungle. They land in different spots with relatively few injuries. Stiles wasn't out yet though. North Vietnamese troops combed the area for him, all the while firing blindly into the jungle with hopes of flushing him out. After hiding and waiting for an hour, help was finally on the way. And even at the moment of his rescue, there were still no guarantees.
So I get out of my hiding place. I've got my .38 Special in my right hand, my radio in my left, and right across from me, about 15 feet, I see this little guy, black pajamas, black hat, holding an AK-47. And I say, I've got company. And the mechanic that's manning the machine gun says, shall I hose the area? I said, no, take it up, and with that I took 2 strides, jumped into the air, grabbed the penetrator, and as I'm spinning around, I can see the guy looking at me. And he's got a kind of a half smile. He didn't shoot me, I didn't shoot him.
Fast forward a decade to January 1982. Lieutenant Colonel Stiles was in the air training a young F-4 pilot when he had what he believed was a heart attack. They land safely, he gets checked out, and to his relief, he's fine. But the same thing happens again in January, a year later.
Well, it happened the 3rd year, and I go to the flight surgeon, same thing again. I go to the flight surgeon, and the flight surgeon is going through my records, and he's saying, Stiles, what happened in late January in your past? Because there's nothing wrong with you physically. Ding! Light bulb turns on. That's the first time I thought about it. I was having anxiety attacks associated with being shot down in January 20th of 1972.
Lieutenant Colonel Stiles was suffering from what we now know is PTSD. He found himself struggling to reconcile with his experiences in Vietnam.
As you put it in,
3 decades later, feelings he tried to stuff down all came right back. with a phone call from retired Brigadier General Dan Cherry. General Cherry knew a thing or two about reconciling with the past. Dealing with PTSD and the traumas of war is a reality for many service members. General Cherry didn't suffer from PTSD, but he did have experiences from his Vietnam service that he wanted to reconcile. It was during his second tour to Southeast Asia that General Cherry shot down a North Vietnamese MiG-21.
Got him. 19. He got him. Pasco 2. Nice shot.
Over time, he found himself wondering, did the pilot survive? Did he have a family? Eventually, General Cherry tracked down the pilot and met with him on a talk show in Vietnam. His name is Hong Mi. Despite their dogfight all those years ago, the two quickly became friends. As inconceivable as all this sounds, the story gets even more incredible when Hong Mi shows Dan a red medal he's wearing, signifying that Hong Mi shot down an American jet.
Before I left Hanoi, he brought up the badge. He said, "You know, I told you about my badge." He said, "I think the American pilot was killed. And if he was killed, I would like to someday be able to extend my condolences to his family. If he is alive, I would like to meet him someday."
Dan did some research and found out that Bob Mock, the pilot of that RF-4, had tragically died in a car accident before Dan could reach out to him. But the guy who ejected from the back seat was still alive. So General Cherry called him.
I did discover exactly what happened on that day, and it was in January of 1972, about 3 months prior to our dogfight.
When Dan Cherry called me and said that he had a story about a different way that I'd been shot down, I thought I'd been shot down by the guns shooting at me.
I said, "Do you think it's possible that you and Bob Mock could have been shot down by a MiG rather than ground fire?" Silence on the other end of the phone, real quiet.
I didn't want to bring that bad boy box out of the back of my head and bring it forward.
He had carefully compartmentalized all these bad memories into someplace in the back of his mind, and he didn't like it, the fact that I was bringing all this up again.
I lose sleep. That's the part I really don't like, and I'm losing sleep because I'm thinking about what happened and what I should have done, what I could have done.
I said, "Well, here's the reason I'm asking." And I told him about my reunion with Hong Mi and the research I had done.
And I told him, "No, I don't believe you. I don't want to believe you."
General Cherry was persistent, though. He had already written a book about his meeting and friendship with the MiG pilot and thought Stiles' story, if confirmed, could help others.
And so for the next 6 months, Dan would call me and tell me, this story has so much power to be able to bring reconciliation and recovery to so many people.
And so what I was hoping he would agree to is that when Hong Mi accepted my invitation and would come to the United States, John would agree to meeting him face to face. And I wanted to arrange that meeting.
And so finally I agreed to at least meet Hong Mi. So I see Dan, recognize him, and then I see Hong Mi. There's just something about him that makes you want to know him. And if you ever meet him, you will definitely feel that.
So at a Vietnamese restaurant, the two talk. Colonel Stiles asks Hong Mi questions about that day, January 20th, 1972. And the former North Vietnamese fighter pilot describes things that he wouldn't have known unless he was there.
Because he drew the picture and talked about exactly what happened to us.
Confirming he was the MiG pilot who shot Stiles' jet down all those years ago. A North Vietnamese MiG pilot, his enemy during war.
He's just a great guy. It lifted a huge weight off my chest. And that I think we can all understand.
And he said, Dan, he said, I can't tell you how good this feels. It's like a huge weight has been lifted off of my shoulders. Because now, for the first time, I know exactly what happened that day.
Lieutenant Colonel John Stiles and Brigadier General Dan Cherry continue to tell their stories of Vietnam and their reconciliation with the past. It's a message they hope inspires other veterans from Vietnam and today to share their stories and finally find peace at home.
You served with honor. You made us proud.
One of the things that I thought has been very effective with veterans, especially Army and Marine veterans,
You have earned your place among the greatest generations.
they tend to come up and tell us that this is the first time after hearing our story that they are able to tell their story.
Those of you who can stand, please stand.
We have this opportunity to share our story with people and let them know that they don't have to hold a grudge.
As we say those simple words, which always greet our troops when they come home from here on out, welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home. Thank you. We appreciate you. Welcome home.